I don't know what happened. I walked out of the room and I didn't even take the call. I dismissed it. I take it at this point we're all ready.
We have a quorum, yes.
Terrific. Okay, then good morning and welcome to our first meeting for 2021. Today is January 11th, and this is the meeting of the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority Board of Trustees. I hope everyone was able to join us using the GoToMeeting instructions that were provided. And just to note, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed for our website. First, some ground rules for the meeting. Please mute your device when you're not speaking so we can reduce background noise. When you're making a motion or comment, please state your name so we know who you are. For those of you logged in through the website or app, please use the chat box to indicate when you'd like to comment or ask a question so that we can minimize the amount of people talking over one another. Ted will be monitoring the chat box and he will call on people in the order that requests come in. After those comments, we'll ask for any comment from those of you who are joining us by telephone. Are there any questions about this? Okay, now to start the meeting. I'll ask Beverly Morris to read the Open Public Meeting Act. Good morning, Beverly.
Beverly, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Beverly.
Okay, here we go. This is to advise that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been forwarded to the Newark Star Ledger, the Asbury Park Press, the Courier News, the Daily Record, the Home News Tribune, the Jersey Journal, and the New Jersey Herald.
Can we have the roll call, Beverly?
Peter, okay, here we go. First,
Peter Botsolis, present for Bergen County.
okay, thank you, Peter. Would you mute yourself, please? Okay. Peter, I got. Essex,
David Antonio, Essex County.
Hudson,
Byron Nicholas, present.
Hunterdon,
Zach Rich, Hunter County.
Jersey City,
Marka Patel, present.
Middlesex,
Charlie Kenny, Middlesex, present.
Monmouth,
Terry O'Connor, Monmouth County, present.
Morris,
Kathy DiFilippo, present.
Newark,
Philip Scott, present.
Ocean,
Jack Kelly.
Passaic,
John Bartlett, present.
Somerset,
Sarah Sui, present.
Sussex,
Tom Dragic, present.
Union,
Betty Jane Kowalski, Union County, present.
Warren,
Jason Sarnoski, Warren County, present.
Governor's Office,
Lauren Nathan LaRusso, present.
NJDOT,
Andy Sword,
Genevieve
present.
Clifton, present.
NJ Transit,
Jeremy Colangelo, present.
Port Authority,
Jay Sheffield, here.
Citizens Representative,
Jared Rodriguez, present.
okay, we have full membership present and a quorum.
Thank you, Beverly, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Our first order of business is I will ask for the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes of November 9 and also December 14 board meetings? Okay, seeing none or hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
All for the minute.
Who is that?
Zach Kelly.
Thank you, Matt. And do I have a second?
Second, Zach Rich Hunter.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 How about any abstentions?
Abstain, Sarah Sui from Somerset.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Beverly, I believe the minutes are passed then. I'd like to take this opportunity to present my report, and I should have identified myself. I'm Kathy DiFilippo, Commissioner from Morris County and the Chair of the NJTPA Board. So I want to say good morning and Happy New Year. Like every year, every new year, 21 brings us challenges, opportunities, and changes. One change I should note right away is that of January 1st, the NJTPA board is no longer freeholder members. We are now known as county commissioners per state law. I'm sure this will take some time getting used to, but it's also a positive change that modernizes our titles and brings them in line with similar county officials around the country. So for many of us, we can stop trying to describe what a freeholder is. County commissioner is certainly a much more familiar title. Of course, there are other imminent changes that are going to directly affect the work of the NJTPA and the outlook for transportation in general. This includes many new faces in Washington, D.C. The NJTPA looks forward to working with the new administration, including a new Secretary of Transportation, and I'm confident our region's congressional delegation will continue its strong support for transportation. Given our current economic challenges, there's no doubt that federal investment in transportation infrastructure should play a key role in getting our economy moving again. Transportation projects create good-paying jobs while also building the foundation for long-term economic growth and activity. A good example of this is the Portal Bridge North project, which is nearing final approval for a full funding grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration. As you'll recall, at our special meeting in December, the board took action on our Transportation Improvement Program, or better known as TIP, to ensure that we'd be ready to receive more than $750 million in federal funding for this vital piece of infrastructure. I should also note that the NJTPA continues to put federal dollars to work on important local projects as well. On today's agenda, 2 county bridge projects will be added to the TIP as they advance into engineering. These projects and others like them may not be as high profile as the Portal Bridge, but they are still vitally important to our region's mobility and economy. The NJTPA will continue to make these projects a priority for federal funding. So we look forward to working with the new administration and with Congress to put federal dollars to work on the Portal Bridge and other important transportation projects that will help our economy while also improving safety, mobility, and accessibility for all of our travelers. I'm confident that the NJTPA's long-range transportation plan, which we'll be finalizing this year, will help us achieve these goals. But even as we plan for the future, we must deal with the issues of the present. While 2021 is here, we still face the challenges of 2020, particularly the ongoing pandemic. Despite ongoing efforts that have drastically affected nearly every aspect of our lives, we have seen a resurgence of COVID-19 here in New Jersey and around the country. Now, though promising new vaccines are being administered as we talk, giving us hope that 2020 will in fact be a much better year than 2020. Distributions of vaccines is now a vital aspect of the national and regional supply chain. And the NJTPA will continue to work with its partner agencies, including those in the Greater Regional Metropolitan Area Planning, or MAP Forum, to help strengthen those supply chains and make them more resilient. All of these factors should help us to begin to return to something like the new normal in the months to come. I should note, though, that in the interest of safety and health, the NJTPA staff will continue to work remotely for the time being, and our board and committees will also be held remotely until further notice. We'll certainly keep you posted about any changes to these plans. On that note, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to my fellow board members for all of your hard work over the past year. When I was elected chair a year ago, at a meeting held at the NJTPA board meeting in Newark, I never anticipated for the vast majority of 2020 that we would be working remotely. And here we are in 21 and still working remotely. I know that 2020 was an incredibly challenging year for all of us. Our county and city representatives had to work around the clock on healthcare and human service issues. And now we face the fiscal fallout of a staggered economy. Our transportation partners face great challenges as well, keeping road, rail, and port facilities up and running, while also dealing with the potentially devastating loss of revenue from drastically reduced travel across all modes. And yet, despite those challenges, you always found time to attend our virtual board and committee meetings and to participate in the many other NJTPA activities as well. Your commitment to regional planning and transportation investments is truly remarkable. And I thank all of you for your ongoing efforts to help us create a better region. And last week at our executive board meeting, I had made mention that my thanks also goes out to our staff. During a very difficult time in 2020, our staff kept the office running. We were very busy with projects, as our history of last year's minutes will reflect. And I want to personally thank each and every one of the staff who, during a very trying time in 2020, have been able to maintain the busy schedule that the NJTPA offers to our constituents. With that, I'll say thank you. And I want to see if the NJDOT has any remarks this morning.
Not at this time. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathy.
Thank you. What about NJ Transit? Any remarks this morning?
Good morning, Chairwoman. Just briefly, this is Jeremy Colangelo again. Just briefly, would like to reiterate my thanks to the NJTPA for their quick movement on the Portal North Bridge item. It's only a few weeks ago, I guess, but it does feel like longer than that. So thanks again. And just as a quick sort of summary of where we are now, we're certainly pleased to have seen another federal action taken. We're currently sort of figuring out exactly what those funds, sort of how they get split up between ourselves and the other states. Because we cover service into Pennsylvania and New York, there's a little bit of work that needs to happen to determine the exact allocations. But that was a good piece of news, federally speaking, that came out recently. So we'll certainly be back in touch with how that impacts our financial situation going forward. But other than that, no comments from me. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that. We all look forward to hearing how much money will be provided. Thank you. With that, I'm going to ask our Executive Director, Mary, would you kindly present your report to the board?
Sure, thank you. And Happy New Year, everyone. As Chair DiFilippo said, we can start to feel cautiously optimistic about the direction of the pandemic, thanks to the vaccines that are now becoming available. So here's hoping that we can return to some sort of normal or new normal in the months to come. I'd also like to echo the Chair's thanks to our board members, sub-regional staff, and NJTPA central staff for your work during these challenging times. You all deserve a great deal of credit for keeping transportation planning and investment moving over the past year. And we will continue to keep that work moving forward. Since the last board meeting, staff has been actively preparing for the coming year, finalizing the fiscal year 2022 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. This work program will guide the activities of central staff, the subregions, and transportation management associations for state fiscal year 2022, which begins on July 1st of this year. The draft UPWP was posted to our website in December. It includes many suggestions received from RTAC, NJDOT, and others. The document will go before the Planning and Economic Development Committee in February, and board action is anticipated for March. Speaking of our work program, I am pleased to announce that in December, the NJTPA completed its annual programmatic audit for the fiscal year 2020 UPWP. As the final report indicates, this was a clean audit with no findings or questioned costs. A copy of the final audit was submitted to NJDOT on December 22nd, and a copy of the report will be sent to the board members later this month. I'd also like to remind the board members that in the coming year, you will be asked to approve our updated long-range transportation plan, which we're calling Plan 2050, Transportation, People, Opportunity. Since our last board meeting in November, we've worked with our consultants on a number of outreach activities to gather plan input. This has included focus groups with caregivers, unemployed residents, and others. An online survey, which will be available until February 15th, a meeting with Up Next, our young adult advisory group, presentations to community groups, and more. Of particular note was our December 8th TPA Tuesday Symposium, focusing on advancing equitable transportation systems. Speakers highlighted the legacy of racism and exclusionary policies in transportation and presented opportunities for advancing equitable transportation systems and investments. And along these lines, today the board is being asked to approve the updated version of our Title VI plan, which outlines our commitment to civil rights, environmental justice, and related initiatives in our day-to-day work. This Title VI plan and related work will directly influence our long-range plan as well. Also very relevant to our plan development was the December meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Forum, or MAP Forum. composed of 10 MPOs from New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. At that meeting, experts discussed priorities for the post-pandemic world, including emerging trends and the changing nature of work. These factors include the prospect that many people will continue to work remotely, reshaping transit use and travel patterns, as well as the public embracing walking, biking, and active transportation more than ever before. We also must be better prepared for future crises, including the impacts of climate change. On that note, last week, we released a Plan 2050 background paper on climate change. It calls for continued efforts to both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to make infrastructure more resilient to flooding and other climate impacts. The paper, which is available on our website, also discusses how the NJTPA will continue to support the state's climate policies and programs. In the coming weeks, we'll continue our public outreach for Plan 2050. This will include our third TPA Tuesday Symposium on January 26th, focusing on realizing opportunities through transportation. The keynote speaker will be Robert Puentes, President and CEO of the Enos Center for Transportation. We'll also be holding a series of virtual topic talks and public open house events through early February. The times and dates will be posted on the Plan 2050 website. Drawing on all this public input and on staff work and analysis, we are drafting a plan that will be available for review by the summer, with a formal public comment held prior to board approval in the fall. So, 2021 will be a very busy year. Again, thank you all for your support and continued involvement. And this concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Now we're at the committee reports, and I'll call on Commissioner John Bartlett, Chair of the Project Prioritization Committee, to give the committee report. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Kathy. Thank you very much. I am pleased to report on the activities of the Project Prioritization Committee. At the joint committee meeting in December, the committee considered 5 action items, 3 of which are on today's agenda. First, the committee recommended approval of a minor amendment to the fiscal year 2020 through 23 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, to add the ferry slip reconstruction project at the Central Railroad Terminal Historic Site in Hudson County. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has received a federal passenger ferry grant program award for $5.9 million for the project and will provide additional state funding. This is listed as action item number 1 on today's agenda. Next, the committee considered a minor amendment to the TIP to add the Clay Street Bridge over the Passaic River project, which is being led by Hudson County. This project recently completed the local concept development phase and is ready to advance to preliminary engineering. It will be supported with federal funds from the NJTPA Future Projects line item. For the coming year, $2 million in federal funds will be added for preliminary engineering. In total, the project will cost $62 million, with construction authorization scheduled for 2027. This is listed as action item number 2. Next, the committee considered a minor amendment to the TIP to add the Bridge Street Bridge over the Passaic River project, which is being led by Essex County. This project also recently finished local concept development and will be supported with federal funds from the NJTPA Future Projects line item. For the coming year, $2 million will be added for preliminary engineering, and for 2023, $7 million will be added for design. In total, the project will cost $86 million, with construction authorization targeted for 2027. This is listed as action item number 3. Next, the committee recommended approval of a minor amendment to the TIP to add, this has got to be my favorite minor amendment ever, a minor amendment to add $766.5 million in federal funding for the Portland North Bridge. As the chair mentioned, this is a long-sought project needed to improve our regional rail system. It will replace the aging bridge, which, as we all know, often disrupts rail operations and creates delays due to mechanical failures. The new bridge will also allow NJ Transit to operate longer, higher capacity trains at higher speeds. As you know, and at NJ Transit's request, this board approved the minor amendment at a special meeting following the December joint committee meeting in order to expedite the project's full funding grant agreement, and no further action is required. The final item considered by the committee at the December joint meeting was a modification to the TIP to increase funding on the Route 27 DeHart Place to Route 21 project in Union County. At the request of NJDOT, this modification increases the programmed amount for construction by $12.2 million in fiscal year 2021 in order to cover increased milling and surface operations costs. The committee approved this modification and no further action is needed. That concludes the Project Prioritization Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Freeholder Bartlett. I'm sorry, Commissioner Bartlett. In the interest of simplifying our board actions for this online meeting, we've asked some board members to be prepared to offer a motion in second. And I understand that today Jersey City would like to move this item, item 1.
Yes, Jersey City moves.
Thank you.
And New
NJ
Jersey-
Transit? Go
Yep, New
ahead.
Jersey Transit seconds.
Thank you very
NJT
much.
seconds.
Any comments from the board members? Any comments from members of the public on this item? Ted, do we have any questions? Nope. Okay, hearing none for this item. Beverly, will you please do a call of the roll?
Certainly. Bergen,
Yes.
Essex, Hudson,
Yes.
Hunterdon, Jersey City,
Yes.
Middlesex,
Yes.
Monmouth,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Newark,
Yes.
Ocean,
Yes.
Passaic,
Yes.
Somerset,
Yes.
Sussex,
Yes.
Union, I'm sorry, Union, what was your vote?
Union.
Thank you. Warren,
Yes.
Governor's Office, NJDOT, NJ Transit,
Yes.
Yes.
NJDOT, yes.
And NJ Transit, yes.
Port Authority,
Yes.
Citizens Representative.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. Our second minor amendment to the fiscal year 2020 to 23 Transportation Improvement Program to add the Clay Street Bridge over the Passaic River project in Hudson County. I understand that Ethics would like to move this item.
Essex moves.
And do we have a second from Hudson?
Yes. Hudson County seconds.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Hearing none, I'll ask if there's any comments from the members of the public on this item. I will not hear any. I will ask Beverly to do the roll call.
Okay. Bergen,
Yes.
Essex,
Yes.
Hudson,
Yes.
Hunterdon,
Yes.
Jersey City,
Yes.
Middlesex,
Yes.
Monmouth,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Newark,
Yes.
Ocean,
Yes.
Passaic,
Yes.
Somerset,
Yes.
Sussex, Union,
Yes, Sussex.
thank you. Union,
Union, yes. Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Warren, Governor's Office,
Yes.
NJDOT,
Yes.
NJ Transit,
Yes.
Port Authority,
Yes.
Citizens Representative.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you again, Beverly. Our third minor amendment to the 2020-23 Transportation Improvement Program to add the Street Bridge over the Passaic River project in Essex County. I understand Essex might like to move this item.
Yes. Essex County moves.
Thank you. And do I have a second from perhaps the city of Newark?
Yes. No, City of Newark will second.
Thank you. Any comments from the board members? Hearing none, I'll open it to the public. Any comments for this item? Hearing none, Beverly, I'll turn this over to you.
Bergen,
Yes.
Essex,
Yes.
Hudson,
Yes.
Hunterdon,
Yes.
Jersey City,
Yes.
Middlesex,
Yes.
Monmouth,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Newark,
Yes.
Ocean,
Yes.
Passaic,
Yes.
Somerset,
Yes.
Sussex,
Yes.
Union,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Governor's Office,
Yes.
NJDOT,
Yes.
NJ Transit,
Yes.
Port Authority,
Yes.
Citizens Representative.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you again. Now I'll call on Commissioner Jack Kelly, Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee, to give the committee report. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. Today, I'm pleased to report on the activities of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. At the December joint meeting, the committee considered two action items. The first concerns approval of the NJTPA Title VI Implementation Plan update. As a subrecipient of federal funding, the NJTPA is required to comply with various civil rights statutes, executive orders, and regulations to ensure that traditionally underserved populations are included in the planning process and that their needs are addressed. In September of 2019, this board adopted the NJTPA's Title VI plan in response to the NJTPA's 2018 Federal Certification Review. This past July, we received 3 comments from the Federal Highway Administration's New Jersey Division asking that our plan include additional information concerning organization and staffing, as well as subrecipient review procedures. Central staff revised a plan to address these issues and in November received approval of the revisions from the Federal Highway Administration. Adoption of our updated Title VI implementation plan, including the revisions, is listed as action item number 4 on the agenda. I would like to note that an internal task force of central staff is meeting regularly to focus on strategies and actions to fully implement the NJTPA Title VI plan. Next, the committee recommended support for public transit agency safety plan targets set by NJ Transit. In order to comply with federal regulations, the NJTPA is required to either support NJ Transit safety performance measure targets or establish our own targets for bus and light rail operations. The targets concern fatalities, injuries, collision events, employee injuries, fire events, and system reliability. In coordination with the NJTPA, New Jersey Transit has developed targets by examining various data sources and trends and considering established agency policies. It is therefore appropriate for the NJTPA to support NJ Transit's targets and to plan and program projects that help meet them. With board approval, NJTPA staff will develop text for the current Transportation Improvement Program that discusses these measures and targets and how the TIP helps the region meet them. This is listed as action item number 5. Finally, central staff provided updates on recent activities, including Plan 2050 outreach, the fiscal year 2022 Unified Planning Work Program Development Schedule, and recent Together North Jersey activities. And Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Beverly, can I ask you to call the roll?
Need a motion and action.
Citizens representative moves on action item number 4.
Thank you.
City of Newark will second.
Thank you. Any comments from the board members on action item 4? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, Beverly, I'll ask you to call the roll.
Bergen,
Yes.
Essex,
Yes.
Hudson,
Yes.
Hunterdon,
Yes.
Jersey City,
Yes.
Middlesex,
Yes.
Monmouth,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Newark,
Yes.
Ocean,
Yes.
Passaic,
Yes.
Somerset, Sussex,
Yes.
Union,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Governor's Office,
Yes.
NJDOT,
Yes.
NJ Transit,
Yes.
Port Authority,
Yes.
Citizens Representative,
Yes.
motion is carried.
Thank you again. And our 5th action item here is that support for the Public Transit Agency safety plan targets set by New Jersey Transit. May I have a motion on this?
New Jersey Transit moves.
Thank you. And a second?
Passaic County second.
Thank you, Passaic County. Any comments from the board members on this item? Hearing none, any comments from members of the public on this particular item? Hearing none, Beverly, I'll ask you to call the roll again.
Bergen,
Yes.
Essex,
Yes.
Hudson,
Yes.
Hunterdon,
Yes.
Jersey City,
Yes.
Middlesex,
Yes.
Monmouth,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Newark,
Yes.
Ocean,
Yes.
Passaic,
Yes.
Somerset,
Yes. Yes.
Essex,
Yes.
Union,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Governor's Office,
Yes.
NJDOT,
Yes.
NJ Transit,
Yes.
Port Authority,
Yes.
Citizens Representative.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you again. This brings us to our Freight Initiatives report. I understand that Commissioner Charles Kenny, who is the chair, is attending the meeting, but he's unable to read his report due to some background noise. So we've asked our staff, Ann Strauss Weeder, I'm sorry, Anna, just butchered your name. But I understand that you will read the report. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Commissioner Charles Kenny, I am pleased to report on the December meeting of the Freight Initiatives Committee, which was our third annual New Jersey Industrial Real Estate Update. Our first guest speaker was Bill Waxman, Executive Vice President of CBRE, who said that the industrial real estate market is being reconfigured by burgeoning e-commerce driven by the pandemic and shutdowns. As consumers demand faster delivery times, companies involved in online sales and fulfillment need to be closer to more densely populated areas. This, he said, is causing a spike in rental pricing in these areas and an outmigration of companies that do not need such proximity. Towns in southern New Jersey, for example, are poised to grow as logistics centers, similar to what Turnpike Interchange 8A in Middlesex County saw a few years ago. Logistics companies, he said, are now also looking at locations in Pennsylvania, Connecticut, southern New York State, Delaware, and even Maryland because of the level of demand and the availability of developable land. Mr. Waxman noted that online grocery sales are causing more demand for refrigerated and cold chain facilities, a very large and growing sector. Next, we were joined by Jesse Hardy of Prologis, who provided insights from the landlord and developer perspective. After a decline in March and April, leasing activity has returned stronger than ever, with record-setting rents being paid by large companies who require more space. Over 2 million square feet of industrial buildings are currently under construction in the region near New Jersey Turnpike interchanges 12 and 16W. We were also joined by Stephen Hussein from Prologis, who briefed the committee on labor issues, particularly the shortage of qualified workers. Mr. Hussein said Prologis is actively working to broaden the pool of talent to help their tenants. It aims to train 25,000 people to enter or advance in the logistics sector by the year 2025. To accomplish this, it is working with public and academic institutions and has launched a mobile-friendly online learning platform and a digital media campaign. During the panel discussion that followed the presentations, topics raised included the need to improve transit options to help workers reach job sites and to streamline municipal permit approval processes. In addition, at the meeting, committee members learned that the Port Authority is seeing record container activity at the port, along with a slight uptick in cargo at the airports, while air passenger volume is still down. Traffic volume, especially for trucks, continues to rebound at the Port Authority bridge and tunnel crossings. This concludes the Freight Initiatives report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate that you were able to do that for us this morning. Now I'd like, as part of our ongoing planning for 2050 speaker series, I'd like to introduce Dr. James W. Hughes, formerly the Dean of Rutgers University Bluestone School of Planning and Public Safety. Public Policy. Dr. Hughes is the director of the Rutgers Regional Report, which has produced over 40 major economic, demographic, and real estate studies on New Jersey and the broader metropolitan region. And with that, I'd like us all to welcome Dr. James Hughes. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that introduction. Let me start off by offering all of you congratulations and then a basic admonition. First, congratulations. I think you are all still vertical, have not yet gone toes up. You have survived 2020. You have survived and endured the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. So it's not surprising that you have happily said good riddance to 2020 and welcome to 2021. And we all certainly have high hopes for 2021. However, in order not to jeopardize my hard-earned reputation as the Garden State doomster, a basic admonition must be raised. We also had very high hopes when 2020 unfolded, and we now know how that turned out. So temper your optimism. 2020 is in the history books, but 2021 may not be a slam dunk. We still have a dark winter to get through before the economic spring arrives, and that economic spring will arrive. Okay, let's begin with a brief economic perspective on 2020, and then we can put it in the history books. Last February, what turned out to be the terminal month of the record-breaking 128-month-long Great Expansion, we were living in a completely different world. We were in a Goldilocks economy, Not too hot, not too cold, just right. We had sustained employment growth, record low unemployment rates, and inflation was nowhere in sight. In fact, there was an over-the-rainbow fantasy that the roaring 1920s would be matched by the roaring 2020s. The bottom line is February 2020, the economy still had tremendous momentum that had been built up over a full decade. Here are the employment numbers for that 10-year period that ended in February 2020. U.S. added 22.8 million jobs, 17.6% growth rate. New Jersey grew by a more modest 10.6%, still 405,600 jobs over 10 years was a pretty good pace of growth for the Garden State. So we did have substantial momentum. But then the economic world completely unraveled as a series of convulsive and staggering economic events unfolded. In a breathtaking 2-month collapse, 10 years of job growth were erased nationally. The nation lost 22.2 million jobs in March and April. That nearly matched the 22.8 million jobs gained during the preceding 10 years. But the nation had nothing on New Jersey, and this is the bottom half of the slide. Between February and April, the state lost 831,300 jobs. That was more than double the 10-year gain. 1 out of 5 total jobs disappeared in the state. The new roaring 2020s reality. By April, we had roaring levels of unemployment. Total jobs in New Jersey by April had fell back to the level of that of 1985, 35 years ago. But just as I thought the economy was sliding into the abyss, something happened, something which actually shocked me. The world neglected to come to an end. The economy was restarted in May and job growth resumed. Lockdowns were eased, Businesses reopened with new health and social distancing protocols, and Congress and the Fed took aggressive steps to prop up households, businesses, and the financial community. This positioned the economy for last summer's strong bounce back, and bounce back it did. Nonetheless, the pattern of economic advance was subsequently transformed into a long recovery crawl, a potential multi-year journey. The Federal Reserve calls it the long slog ahead of us. I prefer the long recovery crawl. Now, I think it is well recognized that I'm the only really totally objective person in New Jersey. And it's my totally objective opinion that the recovery trajectory is going to take the form of what we call a Nike swoosh, a long, elongated trek to full recovery, a swoosh-shaped recovery path. And that's going to be evident in some of the following data and charts. However, by the end of the year, end of 2020, we had a flattening of the swoosh due to the winter chill. So my plea to the economic gods, don't step on my swoosh, don't squash my swoosh. So let's look at the recovery metrics and let's start with the nation. Two stunning 2020 reversals are evident. As I presented earlier, 22.8 million jobs were gained in 10 years. And then during the 2-month free fall, 22.2 million jobs were lost, wiping out the gains. Then we had a second reversal, April through November. This was the process of recapturing lost economic activity, and this is shown in the bottom of the slide. Between April and November, 12.3 million jobs were added to the national economy. That's a recovery rate of 55.4%. So we reached the halfway point. We've recovered more than half of the jobs we've lost, 55.4%. New Jersey experienced a similar recovery pattern. First reversal, as noted earlier, we lost 831,000 jobs in March and April, double our preceding 10-year gain. So this first reversal, we were hit far harder than the nation by the shocks of the coronavirus. But we have paralleled the nation during the second reversal, and this is in the bottom half of the slide. 405,700 jobs gained during the 7-month economic reopening. So we were recapturing lost economic activity. We recaptured 485,000 plus of the 831,000 jobs lost. That's a recovery rate, as shown in the bottom, 58.4%, slightly better than the national rate of 55.4%. So we're ahead of the nation. But we still have an enormous employment deficit to make up, which we will turn to in a moment. Let's just drill down a little bit deeper into the 7-month economic reopening. First, the nation. This chart shows the employment growth for each of the 7 recovery months, starting in May. The numbers are in thousands. May and June, record-setting job growth, the 2 left bars in the slide. First 2.7 million, and then an all-time record 4.8 million. Those were the 2 greatest employment growth months in the history of the Republic. The hardest sectors hit during the downfall or the free fall: restaurants, healthcare, support services, and retail trade led the sharp bounce back in those 2 months. But that surge did not last forever. The next 5 months, July through November, we experienced steadily declining monthly job gains, and you can see by the shrinking blue bars. So the nation's journey on the recovery highway has decelerated from the fast lane to the slow lane. So we are in a new phase of the recovery. The result of these decreasing gains is a noticeable flattening of the swoosh recovery trajectory. And this is one curve that we really don't want to flatten. So this slide shows the cumulative monthly employment deficit for each month since the start of the recession in February. And the deficit represents the number of jobs needed to get back to the employment level of February. The deficit peaked in April at 22.2 million jobs. We were 22.2 million jobs from the February peak, and that's the low point of the line graph. The deficit then contracted sharply the next 2 months, May and June, due to the rapid rehiring of laid off or furloughed workers. But the decreasing monthly job gains of July through November have started to flatten out the monthly deficit reduction slide. By November, the far right side of the slide, the nation was still 9.8 million jobs shy of reaching the pre-pandemic employment peak of February. New Jersey, similar shift to a slow recovery lane, but the pattern is somewhat more complex. Nonetheless, by October and November, job growth flatlined, with October actually showing a loss before bouncing back in November. Those are the two tiny blue bars on the right side of the slide. And the result is another flattening of the swoosh recovery trajectory. Like the nation, the state still has substantial employment arrears to make up. New Jersey has a deficit as of November of 345,600 jobs. Bottom line, we have a somewhat dark winter that's unfolding as we wait the vaccination of America in New Jersey. But in the context of increased federal support payments, we will definitely see an upswing by the midpoint of the year. So don't get depressed if we get some bad numbers in January and February. Now, after this first dose of economics, you're probably wondering, why the heck would anybody decide to become an economist? Well, I thought of three reasons, three very profound reasons. First, you can talk about money without ever having to make any money. Second, you can say trickle down with a straight pace. And third, if you rearrange the 9 letters in economics, you can easily get comic nose. Okay, what lies ahead? What transformative changes spawned by COVID-19 go beyond cyclical statistics we just reviewed? Big picture, potent economic structural adjustments followed the great 2007-2009 recession. We will see a repeat performance in the years ahead. As that famous economic forecaster from New Jersey, Yogi Berra, once observed, it's like economic deja vu all over again. So what's evident already? First, the pandemic has expedited the future. For example, as we all realize, 3 years of digital cultural adaptation took place in the first 3 weeks of the shutdown. COVID-19 has been a gasoline on the fire accelerant, such as accelerating remote work practices, working at home and online meetings and conferencing, accelerating the surge in e-commerce, and accelerating the bricks and mortar meltdown. A rapid change in each of these areas has been transformed into hyper change. For example, as we've all experienced because of online shopping growth, bricks and mortar retail carnage had long been underway. But what had been anticipated as a multi-year meltdown has taken place in a matter of months. Second, at the same time, the pandemic has also caused fundamental structural shifts in trend. Let's briefly look at 2. First, trend shift 1, the experiential economy. This was driven by millennials after the great 2009 recession. The often obsessive consumption of physical goods by baby boomers was replaced with the consumption of experiences by millennials. Acquisition of experiences rather than the acquisition of goods. But many of these experiences are now coronavirus hobbled. hobbled by the new social distancing, crowd avoiding protocols. For example, F, food, fitness, and fun experiential activities, food, fitness, and fun, had emerged as a strategy to fill retail voids and vacancies in struggling shopping centers and malls that were battered by e-commerce. However, health imperatives now undermine the experiential economy and its associated lifestyles and real estate sectors. What this has done to shopping centers is F has been disrupted by the coronavirus and its aftershocks. In its stead, the shopping center world has been replaced by D, B, and V, distress, bankruptcy, and vacancy by its tenants. And the world of pain in this area will continue through 2021. In contrast, as you all know, New Jersey's economic landscape has been filling up with massive delivery systems known as fulfillment centers, windowless 1 million square foot behemoths. Now, what could sound more virtuous than a fulfillment center? What marketing genius came up with the level of fulfillment? It suggests happiness delivered, just what New Jersey ordered. Now there is a new complementary phenomenon that has been spurred on by the pandemic. To speed the delivery of happiness, e-commerce is producing smaller last mile delivery stations. A perfect location for last mile delivery stations are vacant retail properties due to their location. This portends a major land use transformation. Delivery speed is of the essence, and a new ecosystem is developing. Two dimensions among others. One, instead of consumers driving from their residence to the shopping center, commercial vehicles flow from the new shopping center-based last mile delivery stations to consumers' residences. So this portends new patterns of traffic flow. Current technology, delivery vans are now experiencing record sales. Mercedes-Benz Sprinters and Ford's Transit vans are hot, ideal for shorter routes and compressed delivery times. But that's today. In the years ahead, certainly by the end of the decade, autonomous vehicles may rule. And this is what may be coming to a former shopping center near you. There is also another complementary e-commerce phenomenon. The consumer does the last mile, not to shop, but to pick up. So curbside pickup has obviously soared, and it's now a quite common phenomenon. So surviving retailers may be converting shopping center stores to mini e-commerce fulfillment centers with drive-through pickup facilities. Trend shift 2, office markets, work processes, and workplaces. This is now a watershed moment for the world of work, the basic functioning and structure of the office market and the workplace. Basic question, will the magnitude of distress in office markets caused by the pandemic match or surpass the distress of bricks and mortar retailing caused by the rise of e-commerce? The coronavirus shock may have exposed an outmoded white-collar workplace structure and ways of working. Work is now recognized, as of the start of 2021, more of an activity rather than as a place. And it probably was a major market failure that work simply as a physical place remained the dominant mindset for so long. The concept of aggregating people in one office location escaped serious disruption. But I think the pandemic has now revealed that many office ecosystems were being run simply as relics of the 20th century, despite massive infusions of 21st century information technology that fully transformed works. What is the future of the office? I think pre-COVID mindsets continued to adjust to the new reality as work as an activity, challenging the assumptions of the past. The future of the office is now subject to intense discussion and analysis, and a massive rethink of the traditional knowledge-based workplace is now taking place. Additional rethink, the blind acceptance of long commutes guided by rigid 9-to-5 schedules. Potential endangered species, the ritual of commuting 5 days per week to large centralized headquarters offices in order to simply be crammed cheek by jowl in a sea of workstations. So this was the reward for a 2-hour tortuous daily commute. Now, as we all know from experience, the spring of remote work, March of 2020 through June 2020, greatly accelerated the long-term shift to remote out of the office, digital work at home practices. Digital tools were adopted on a vastly accelerated timeline. Now, according to a McKinsey & Company survey, private companies pivoted to the new work arrangements 40 times faster than they thought was possible. They jumped 3 to 4 years ahead into the future workplace in 3 to 4 weeks, a quantum leap. And Zoom went from little known to ubiquitous. Zoom logins, 10 million per day at the start of January to 300 million per day by late March, 10 million to 300 million in less than 3 months. And then it really started to spread at hyper speed. I think at the end of the day, looking back, this could rank as one of the great office market disruptors of all time. Another metric just published by the University of Chicago, from mid-March through mid-September, a 6-month period, Americans spent 60 million fewer hours commuting to work, to and from work each day, 60 million hours per day saved. Not all of this was used for work. About 35% of the saved time was spent on primary jobs. So that's 22 million hours each workday spent on primary jobs due to non-commutation. So currently, I think the coronavirus has exposed the fragility of the broader office ecosystem. And at this stage of alternative strategies, I think the one that appears least likely in 2021 is that every organization will bring every employee back to the pre-pandemic office space 5 days per week. Instead, there may be a significant rebalancing of the entire office ecosystem, the entire work ecosystem. And this rebalancing process is now testing a range of hybrid work models. These would involve a de-densified, attendance-restricted, virus-resistant central offices or central hubs, much more space, perhaps twice as much space per employee, and numerous remote work options. The latter would comprise not only work from home, but also the establishment of smaller, multiple satellite office facilities. These would comprise micro offices, co-working spaces in suburban areas that are close to the residence clusters of remote workers. And such satellite offices near home locations would attempt to recreate the community aspects of central office life, perhaps several times per week. One model that is emerging or has been projected is a hub and spoke model, an extended multi-nodal geographic office footprint. So this would provide really a flexible toolkit of workplace offerings or platforms. And the central office may become a much less frequently attended hub. Potential new function, the hub is a club. The hub is a club, a place for onboarding new employees, a place for periodic, creative, direct in-person interaction, a place for building team spirit and organizational culture, and a place for big team meetings. Concurrently, intense private work and small team collaboration can be removed from the hub and distributed. Nonetheless, despite these possibilities, there is still yet no one blueprint or established playbook for the optimal way to adapt to these new exigencies. 2021 will be a period of new exigencies and new strategies. Unresolved questions. Will corporate cultures fade? Creativities flag? Team spirits erode with the diminishment of the central office? Alternatively, does bringing people together under a single roof actually promote interactions that create new ideas? Or does it promote idle chatter? Is the central office really a glorified social chatterbox? In contrast, caveat on trying to control distributed satellite facilities, trying to corral staff in a myriad of disparate locations sounds like trying to herd cats. And if this new model is adopted, it's going to be the source of new administrative problems and a long period of experimentation. In any case, the adoption of a new model of flexible job mobility has significant potential to re-energize the suburban office landscape. This was New Jersey's nation-leading core economic competence in the final decades of the 20th century. Low-rise suburban office buildings, which we could label ground scrapers. But during the past 10 years, it became the poster child for yesterday's office economy and had long since fallen out of favor. But an emerging network workplace model potentially provides a new lifeline for suburban offices. So we could call this the potential revenge of the ground scrapers, a resurgence in the popularity of low-rise suburban office buildings. Urban skyscrapers ruled the past 2 decades. That rule is now being somewhat challenged, and this could potentially benefit an underutilized suburban office inventory. So the question is, will a geographically distributed office ecosystem become the new normal, a new abnormal, or a temporary aberrant? These are data from CBRE, the largest commercial real estate services firm in the world. As you can see, Manhattan, this is not vacancy rate, this is occupancy. Buildings may be fully leased, and the occupancy rate indicates how many people are actually attending. Manhattan's office occupancy, 10%. Suburban offices in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, almost 1/3. So triple the occupancy rate of Manhattan. For the suburban office inventory, you don't have to take a subway to get to them, and you can avoid density-controlled elevators and easily used stairways. The high-rise buildings, at least currently, until we get a widely distributed vaccination process, have both horizontal and vertical transportation issues. Horizontal issues, mass transit avoidance is still a major issue. It is still a stressful experience despite heroic efforts of daily sanitization procedures by transportation agencies. Vertical transportation, the elevator is currently, under our current duress, the Achilles heel for high-rise buildings. The elimination of closely packed elevators has hindered the functioning of office towers, to say nothing of residential towers. Another difficulty related to this, lobby log jams and bottlenecks as you try to access the upper floors. That's why suburban walk-up stairway dependent buildings have somewhat of a new market allure. Poster child for Manhattan's current problem, former Time and Life building in Midtown Manhattan, now rebranded as 1271 Avenue of the Americas. This is one of America's iconic post-war office buildings. Built in 1957, it's now 63 years old. It's part of Rockefeller Center, the first movement of Rockefeller Center to the west side of 6th Avenue. 2.1 million square feet, 48 stories tall. Recently fully renovated and reskinned for 8,000 workers, and it's fully leased. Currently, 500 workers per day show up, barely 6%. This is the new ghost town. Even with 30 elevators, density controls create physical headaches. Okay, brief sidebar. The new office envy versus the old office envy. Old pre-pandemic office envy one. Who has the biggest corner office in the central office building? This is where you go when you're at the top. Old office envy two. This is the next level below the corner office. How do you rate your position? Who has the most ceiling tiles in their office? The new pandemic-driven office inventory. Who has the best dedicated home office space? Zoom embarrassment one. Work from home, WFH, stuck in the basement. Zoom embarrassment two. Work from home at the kitchen table. Again, new world that has emerged. Fundamental reset. This downturn is now recognized as a fundamental long-term disruption that requires resets by many organizations. The bottom line is the pandemic crisis is instigating a long overdue re-examination of the fundamentals of the workplace, work location, and the workforce. And each of these has tremendous transportation implications. Another issue, deepening disparities, the K-shaped recovery. This is of vital importance. Like any economic downturn, coronavirus recession has widened the gulf between those able to navigate its effects and those who cannot. Thus, there is not a singular recovery path. The swoosh line that I presented earlier has to be modified with a K superimposed on it. Two disparate trajectories coming from the swoosh, a two-track recovery or a two-lane recovery. Many Americans are prospering, while many are barely staying afloat or more ominously suffering. One example of the disparity is the Zoom and gloom phenomenon, the Zoom and gloom economy. We have a sharp divergence between what we could call the charm circle of elite credentialed professionals successfully working remotely at home. That's the upper arm of the K, and the simultaneous decimation of the lower wage, low credentialed office support workers, the lower arm of the K. Virtual workers are doing well, while the direct and indirect support workers, both inside the office and in the surrounding environment, bearing the brunt of the economic shock. So, the rapid adoption of remote working technology that has fostered economic continuity has simultaneously produced winners and losers. Other potential structural changes. Residential suburbanization is back on our radar screens. Not surprisingly, the suburbs had gotten a bad rap the past decade. Suburbs were viewed as the relic of the way we wanted to live in the 20th century. But suburbia is still New Jersey's core competence. It's our dominant land use, and the coronavirus may be causing another transformation. So there is boom amidst the economic gloom. Suburban house prices have surged and Zoom towns have emerged. And the emergence of Zoom towns is reshaping the residential landscape, and in turn may shape the post-pandemic office locational parameters and the location of economic activity. We've often heard a lot the past decade about live, work, play environments, LWP environments that were favored by millennials. Now we have suburban housing with single family units now representing the new LLWP habitat, WLWP habitat. The new housing model, both an apocalyptic bunker and a finished machine for living, internalizing all the amenities that were once provided by the external environment. So housing in many cases is now an amenity-laden, deeply feathered double LWP nest with the supplemental L including learning space for home classrooms. So we have a live, learn, work, and play basic habitat. Acceleration of trend. Millennials had already entered the family raising stage of the life cycle and had just begun their suburban odyssey. Many had been sitting on the fence, delaying making a final decision. The pandemic has started to push many of them off the fence. Bottom line, the burbs are back somewhat, at least. The single family unit is again back. And the question is its sustainability. Has the future been accelerated too much? Has market demand been borrowed from the future? Perhaps, but it may be, there has been a slowdown in the suburban movement, but it may be the sheer shortage of suburban single-family unit inventory that is inhibiting the satisfaction of demand. Multifamily housing construction was the growth locomotive the past decade. Single-family home construction was the caboose. Another pattern or example of pandemic-driven structural change. New York City, New Jersey economic patterns. In the 10 years between February 2010 and February 2020, New York City had added almost 1 million jobs, New Jersey around 400,000 jobs. So New York City was clearly the region's economic growth locomotive. But then the pandemic hit. As shown in this slide, in 2 months, top third of the slide, New Jersey lost 831,000 jobs. New York City, a much greater 944,000 jobs. So New York City was pummeled just as much as New Jersey, or even more so, by the pandemic. But the 7-month reopening in the middle of the slide has favored New Jersey. As can be seen, New Jersey has gained almost 500,000 jobs, 486,000, compared to 372,000 in New York City. New Jersey's recovery rate through November, 58.4%, is half again as high as New York City's 39.4%. So at least currently, New York City may have lost some of its mojo, some of its motive power. One other final economic sector, manufacturing, which we tend to forget about. Manufacturing was once the centerpiece of New Jersey's economy. However, its relative importance has diminished during the past 4 decades, although it is still important. More importantly, the pandemic has now raised very serious questions about fragile global supply chain, the need to reshore critically important manufacturing activities. So in this context, I'd like to suggest there will be indeed a renewed emphasis on manufacturing. It's going to be a significant focus, I think, of economic public policy in Washington. However, I predict the factory of the future in New Jersey will consist just of one man and one dog. The man is needed to feed the dog, while the dog's job is to keep the man from touching the computer. It's not going to be as labor intensive as it was in the historic past. Okay, time is getting short. Now for those words you have been longing to hear, perhaps desperately longing to hear. In conclusion, we are undergoing a massive reshaping of the economy, and a long recovery crawl confronts us. The economy will improve by mid-year, but the recovery arithmetic is still daunting. We still have to recover 345,000 jobs to get back to our pre-recession employment levels. One thing is likely, we will not return to pre-pandemic economic normal. We have not yet come close to digesting long-lasting COVID-driven change. Technological and economic disruptions have been unleashed, and post-vaccination, we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. The world is being transformed, and as suggested earlier, this provides new opportunities going forward. The old adage, crisis is too good of an opportunity to waste. But more importantly, let's not leave the vulnerable behind. In any case, welcome to 2021. Let the reconstruction begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. Wealth of information. I also, I just enjoy the way you present. Last year you were enjoyable. I'm not sure we saw this coming quite to the severity that we experienced in 20. But I will ask, do any of the board members have any questions for Dr. Hughes?
How much do we think?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Jared Rodriguez. How much do we think that there's a lot of movement to buy, say, weekend houses, right, versus permanent moves? And this is like completely just my own experience, but a lot of folks that I know that are purchasing homes are like tolerating this sort of what they think is temporary inconvenience with plans to return and perhaps keep the house as a weekend house. Have you thought about that, like versus the, more permanent move?
Yeah, I've thought about it. The data to confirm that are really hard to come by, at least in public data accounts. I think in both cases, it is occurring. A lot of anecdotal evidence indicates almost sometimes a herd mentality of some millennials following what their colleagues essentially do. But at the same time, there are individuals and households that are affluent, particularly those affluent enough to secure a second home that could be used on weekends or used in terms of emergencies. So I think one of the things that's going to be interesting in 2021 is to follow the observation that you have and see how it exactly plays out. But in all cases, shortages of inventory, are one of the issues. And even if there is significant demand for suburban housing, it's going to be very, very difficult to ratchet up housing production, particularly in those communities, those blessed communities that have public rail access and the like. A lot of those communities are built out. And so the new construction would be in more transit, but almost in transit deserts, to say the least, and the like. But we'll be seeing, I think, a whole set of new housing patterns working themselves out in 2021. And again, this is a sharp departure from what we've experienced the past 5 years.
And just to follow up on that question too, I mean, I realize sort of exactly while I was asking it, I mean, it's a question that is underpinned by white privilege and economic privilege. Definitely. How much do we see, I mean, at least, or do you see government reckoning with the fact that their prime customer for transit has been the wealthy, educated commuter? This is particularly for rail, I think. And how much is that potentially, or how much should we be aware of the potential for just a fundamental change in the way of our thinking, that maybe our primary customer isn't that sort of privileged commuter to the central business district. It's the everyday man that should just be using this for their base transportation needs. And then therefore, like, what does that mean in your opinion to the way that we schedule rail? Do we need to be thinking about it less as a peak demand scenario and more of like a round the clock type of service?
Well, that's a great observation, and I think it relates to the K-shaped recovery pattern. Traditional commuting patterns may have been significantly altered permanently by the ability to work remotely. Also may be altered by the new distributed workplace sub-hubs throughout the metropolitan area, which could impact the traditional rail protocols and the like. But many of those more affluent individuals, well, obviously have many more options. They don't have to commute every day. They have the ability to commute by automobile. So those who do not have, whose jobs do not permit to work remotely and may not have car ownership and the like, I think they've moved closer to the front of the line in terms of priority going forward. So in terms of looking at the future of our public transportation systems, we have to be much more cognizant of that sort of that split within the workforce and who has the ability to adapt very easily, and they have adapted very easily to the new work imperatives, and those that do not. So that could be a fairly significant shift.
Thanks.
Well, thank you.
This is Jeremy Colangelo. Sorry, just heard a little background noise there. Dr. Hughes, very interesting presentation as always. One of the things, of course, at NJT that we are keeping an eye on is the changing workplace environment. We've obviously continued to focus on essential travel, essential workers, doing a lot really on the bus side vis-a-vis those issues. But the office environment is certainly one that I don't think anyone has a solid handle on right now in terms of how it would modulate in the future. And I was curious from the data that you've been looking at, if you've seen any changes that would indicate any sort of a trend in the last 3 to 6 months. I think we saw, as we were doing the tracking, there was obviously the drastic change in March, and then sort of a small gradual return that kind of trickled along through the summer, and then nothing really substantive happened after Labor Day, which in some sets of scenario plans had been one of the times when you might see some of that. Now, it's probably related to schools and lots of other things, but I was just curious if you saw anything in the data, again, over these last several months that would indicate a trend in any way.
Again, a very good question and observation. 2021, I think we'll begin the transformation. There's been an acknowledgement by many organizations and companies that we do have new potentials, new remote working possibilities, and the productivity has been good. But they haven't decided on a future plan yet. The one, it's not published data, but from the real estate brokerage firms and New York City firms looking at suburban space, they're exploring what the possibilities are, but they haven't fully decided yet. And if they do make the leap, it's for a short-term lease, not the 6-7 year standard lease for office space. But they're looking for space or sublease space where they can make a commitment for a year, perhaps to test out new working relationships and the like. So we don't have a set of established protocols yet. And I think what we'll be seeing for the balance of this year, still almost 12 months minus 11 days, a period of testing and experimentation, and then organizations and firms maybe looking over their shoulder, looking sideways, how firms that did make an early leap into something new, or firms that made a decision to go back to pre-pandemic patterns, how it's working out. So we could be in for a multi-year period of adjustment.
Great, thanks very much.
Dr. Hughes, I want to thank you again for your presentation this morning. In the interest of time, I'm going to open up for public participation. We have Ted will be has been monitoring our chat box, so he will call for comments there, and then after that we'll open up for the ability for anybody who's on the telephone today. Ted, do you have anyone in the chat box that would like to talk?
No, Chair, not at this time. We didn't have anybody sign up in advance for public comment either, so it would be basically at your discretion at this point.
Okay, then if we could give a moment and allow for anybody who is on the telephone who would like to speak, we'll open the floor for the public on the telephone. Well, it doesn't sound like we have any questions from the public either. As a reminder, we advise members, well, I was going to say it was only a 3-minute, but I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for participating today. And I want to remind you that our next meeting for the NJTPA board will be held on Monday, March 8th at 10:30 in the morning. And the log-on details for that virtual meeting will be provided as we get closer to that date. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Middlesex makes a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Linda.
Sussex second.
Who was that?
Sussex second.
Thank you, Sussex. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you so much. And again, Happy New Year and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.